Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the 2021 Eitaikyo service. The format for the beginning of the service will be Sambujo, followed by the Hyobyaku-mon, or announcement of the service. Okay, and during the Hyobyaku-mon, we'll be recognizing and featuring over 290 names. Is it right? 290 names of those people that have found Jodo Shinshu to be so valuable in our everyday lives that they donated to this perpetual memorial fund that will make it possible to have the temple and the teachings here for as long as possible, right? So I know it's going to seem long. I'm going to say this now. I know it's going to seem long, but in actuality, spending 10 seconds per person is really a small price to pay for what we've all been able to receive. So keep that in mind. Even though it's 290 names, it's 10 seconds or 15 seconds for that valuable person that has thought about us for the rest of our lives. So after that, we'll have the chanting of the Sanbutsuge, and then we'll begin with our program with our MC for today. Okay? Right. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot. We're going to start with Kansho, not Sambujo. Kansho, calling bell, right? And then Sambujo, and yeah. But yeah, thank you. Kansho. We respectfully call upon the Tathagata Amida to enter this dojo, as we joyfully scatter flowers of welcome. We respectfully call upon the Tathagata Shakyamuni to enter this dojo, as we joyfully scatter flowers of welcome. We respectfully call upon the Tathagatas of the 10 directions to enter this dojo, as we joyfully scatter flowers of welcome. Namondos, 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 namondos. Today, on this occasion of the 2021 Eitaikyo service, the members of the Venice Honganji Buddhist Temple have reverently come before Amida Buddha to show our appreciation for those that have provided a place for us to receive the Buddha Dharma and continue on this path of Sanbutsuge. Those past beloved are the following.
Atsuko Akiyota, Jitsu no Akioka, Kenneth Ichiro Amamoto, Yoshino Amate, Clifford Arai, Sydney Bender, Etsu Deguchi, George Tokyo Dori, Haswe Dori, Noboru Dori, L. Endo, Tozo Endo, Reverend Hoshin Fujikado, Akira Fujimoto, Angoro Fujimoto, Haru Fujimoto, Masayoshi Fujimoto, Suki Fujimoto, Reverend Bunyo Fujimura, Jane Kazutomi Yoga, Mei Fukuda, Shimano Furuya, Ichiro Hamazawa, Takeno Hamazawa, Gary Haruo Harada, Edward Yukio Harada, Neko Harada, Sachiko Kyle, Eddie Rogelio Itashima, Minoru Itashima, Akira Kojo, Eizo Kojo, Osame Kojo, Inuyo Okoda, Masaru Okoda. Nobukichi Kory, Senior Jin Ichiho, Reverend Satsuya Ichikawa, Yasashi Ichikawa, Shigeru Ichino, Senior Ichino Tsubo, George Minoru Igawa, Joe Imanishi, Toru Ino, Ie Ino, Hanayo Inokuchi, Mark Masashi Inoguchi, Semi Satoru Inokuchi, Maro Inokuchi, Howard Ko Iseda, Yoneko Ishida, Jack Ishii, Dean Tadauchi Ito, Eiichi Ito, Jaden Tadao Ito, Keiichi Ito, Shie Ito, Tadaki Tom Ito, Yaeno Ito, Subie Iwai, Shigeo Iwahara, Isako Nei Izuhara, Tad Tadashi Izuhara, Kazuko Karamatsu, Takeo Kagawa, Sato Kanda, Yuriko Kanemoto, Marumasa Kariya, Hideo M. Katayama, Eiji Kato, Bun Kishimoto, Toraichi Kishimoto, Misao Eri Kita, Tamae Kita, Unosuke Kita, Ishiko
That was a headphone
Kobayashi,
jack. There was another one.
Keiichi Kobayashi,
Yeah,
Masu
but it's
Kobayashi,
you put it in the headphone jack.
Anessa Uro Kobayashi, George Koda, Harue Koda, Hiroshi Koda, Mary Koda, Noboru Koda, Sonoe Koda, Ameichi Koda, Yoshio Kodani, Frank Yoshio Kokawa, Irene Ayako Kokawa, Sumi Kato Kubota, Katunori Kuda, Shigeno Kuda, Kiwayo Kujubu, Mary Kujubu, Masaichi Kujubu, Chikao Kujubu, Kusae Kunichika, Ritsuko Kunichika, Tetsu no Suke Kunichika, Albert Kurashige, Kikue Kurashige, Takeno Kuwahara, Kazuko Kuwara, Kiichiro Kuwata, Masao William Masamitsu, Baby Masuda, Isao Masuda, Matsuo Masuda, Yojiro Masuda. Brenda Hiroko Matsuoka, Reverend Duke Matsuoka, Baby Matsubara, Hanaka Matsubara, Jiro Matsubara, Kyoko Matsubara, Saburo Matsubara, Shizuko Matsubara, Reverend Ayoko Matsubayashi, Reverend Shushin Matsubayashi, Michiko Matsuki, Hiroshige Matsumoto, Misao Matsumoto, Kiyoshi Matsumoto, Jack Kenichi Matsura, Reverend Ben Maeda, Akini Maeda, James Maeda, Judy Sachie Mikawa, Kiku Miyake, Seitaro Miyake, Masa Miyake, Hanzo Miyake, Shina Mori, Tadaichi Morimasu, Edward Toshiyuki Morimoto, Kusako Morita, Harry Seichi Morita, Hiroshi Morita, Masaichi Morita, Naoko Morita, Sam Masanori Morita, Torano Morita, Tsuyako Morita, Yukio Frank Morita, Masaki Jim Nakagiri, Mitsubi Nakagiri, Sayo Nakagiri, Isae Nakagiri, Nancy Fumiko Nakagiri, Hideji Nakamizo, Mari Tina Nakamura, Tamako Nakamura, Tamayo Nakamura, Kazuo Nakano, Kazuko Nakanochi, Setsuji Nakao, Masuyo Nakao, Inosuke Nakatsu, Isamu Harry Naraki, Tsuyako Anita Naraki, Yukio Niioka, Tomochi Ta Miya, Edward Nishihara, Etaru Nishihara, Hana Nishihara, Mitsuo Nishihara, Shizue Nishihara, Toshi Nishihara, Michi Nishihara, Satoru Nishikawa. Sorry, that was Michi Nishikawa and Satoru Nishikawa. Frank Nobuo Nishina, Joy Naomi Nishina, Ronald Todd Nishina, Tadao Todd Nishina, Masuno Fuji Nishina, Matsuko Noguchi, Ram Shunji Noriyuki, Lillian Kiyono Noriyuki, Noboru Obana, Sam Isamu Obana, Susumu Obana, Oshi Ochi, Chiyokichi Ogata. Maki Ogata, Shikazo Ogata, Wai Ogata, Fumie Ogawa, Fusao John Ogawa, Amy Okafuji, Sagal Oscar Okafuji, Denjiro Okamoto, Sue Okamoto, George Kiyoshi Oki, Iso Oki, Shiro Jack Oki, Tsunejiro Oki, George Shigeo Oku, Toshimune Okubo, Tomoe Omote, Toshimitsu Omote, Toshiyuki Omote, Dal Tadashi Onoe, Jack Kazuto Oriba, Fumio J. Ozaki, Haru Ozaki, Minoru Ozaki, Teruo Ozaki, Tamako Ozasa, Teiji Sakamoto, Mitsuno Sasaguchi, Nobue Sasaguchi, Yoshitatsu Sasaguchi, Henry Aichi Sasajima, Hisako Sasajima, Kazuo Charles Sato, Ethel Yanaru Sato, Aizo Senmaru, Matsuko Senmaru, Kaoru Shimoide, Aaron Scott Kaoru Shimoide. Ben Sutomu Shimoide, Kanekichi Shimoide, Kenneth Tomio Shimoide, Masako Shimoide, Kazushige Shimono, Haruyo Shinmoto, Kyoto Shinmoto, Tsuneo Toni Shinmoto, Tsunetaro Shinmoto, Reverend Jukaku Shirasu, Mrs. Yoshi Shirasu, Hatsue Mary Soman, Ruby Spector, Kikuichi Sugino, Setsuko Tsunahara, Genjiro Suzuki, Sadano Tachikawa, Kaneshiro Tachikawa, Sadao Takakawa, Takase Takeda, Len Shigeki Takemoto, Gojiro Takemoto, Yoshi Takemoto, Tatsuo Tamata, Chiyoko Hanabiki, Akiko Tashiro, Eileen Shizuko Tateishi, Akiko Tateishi, William Tateishi, Masao Terakami, Yoshia Terakami, Frank Masaru Tokirio, Tom Toyoshima, Kinya Tsukiyashi, Kuniko Tsukiyashi, Hatsuyo Tsushima, Kenosuke Tsushima. Sumiko Tsushima, George Hiroshi Ueda, Janet Takako Ueda, Cynthia Matsue Uehara, Harue Ueki, Kipuno Ueki, Sadamu Ueki, Sueichi Ueki, Kazuchi Uematsu, Sumiko Uematsu, Tsunao Ushijima, Kiyoshi, Mitsuko Yamamoto, Shigeichi Yamamoto, Yasu Yamamoto, Terumi Yamaoka, Shigeo Yanaru, Mary Mariko Yasuda, Kiku Yoshikawa, Toyoichiro Yoshikawa, Yutaka Yoshikawa, Masaki Yoshino, Takashi Tak Yoshino, Yoshiko Yoshino, Kaitsuro Yumori.
With deepest reverence and gratitude for the all embracing wisdom and compassion of Amida, we recite the name Namo Amida Butsu. Please put your hands together and repeat after me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namondos, namondos, namondos. 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 Namondos, 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 namondos.
Onno
Good morning and welcome to this morning's Eitaikyo service. Eitaikyo is our temple's promise to propagate the teachings in perpetuity. Today is a day when we remember those who are no longer with us. I am Barbara Fukuji, and I will be the chairperson for this morning's service. We will begin with incense offering by our organizational representatives.
Cub Scout Pack 79, Girl Scout Troop 5325, Dharma School, Sangha teens, junior YBA, ABBA, BWA,
Bukyokai, Reverend Kory will now lead us in the reading of the three treasures and introduce our guest speaker.
Hyobyaku-mon. Injin ukugatashi ima sureni uku. Buppo kikigatashi ima sureni kiku. Kono mi konto ni mukatte dose zumba sarari izure no sho ni mukatte ka kono myodo sen. Daishu moro tomo ni shishin ni sammo ni kieshi tatematsuru deshi. 自ら仏に消し立てまつる。まさに願わくは人と共に、大道を体現して無常意を起こさん。まつる。まさに願わくは人と共に、来週を通りして一切無限ならん。無常人人二名の方は、約千万号にもあよことかたし、我ら今検問し受持することを得たり、願わくは如来の真実義を芸し立てまつらん。The three treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life? Now we are living it. Difficult it is to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear it. If we do not deliver ourselves from the present life, no hope is that we shall be free from suffering and sorrow in the ocean of birth and death. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I put my faith in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of thy way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves thy supreme will. I put my faith in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of thy doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I put my faith in Sangha.
Thank you, video crew, for putting up with all of that stuff and making this all possible for people at home to do it. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining this morning's Eitaikyo service. Today, I thought I'd continue the tradition of having these interestingly different guest speakers.
Remember, last year we had our first
video
message
by
by Reverend Brian Gatha from the Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai, or what we know as the Orange Teachings of the Buddha Book Group. Right? But it was a really wonderful message that he did on the founder of Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai, Reverend Dr. Numata. So I thought I'd do something a little different even today and ask someone that I've known for a little while, well, I guess it's been quite a while, but my memory's so short sometimes that I feel like I just met them, but now I've known them for a while. And they could share the influence of Amida Buddha's light that they've been able to receive in their everyday lives with each and every one of us, and maybe inspire us even more to delve into our own lives and how the teachings resonate with us. So I asked Mr. Rick Stambul to give a message today. And even though it's unfortunately he couldn't join us, he was nice enough to pre-record a message as well. So before we hear his message, I wanted to share a little bio from Mr. Stambul on his activities, not only in Southern District, but also in BCA. He's just, you know, I knew him as one of those guys that dressed up in the yukatas and did the crazy dancing at Quon, right? But then as I got more involved with Southern District, you really realize how much work he's done for each and every one of us in BCA. Here it goes. So Mr. Rick A. Stambul has been a member of the West Los Angeles Buddhist Temple since 1985 and is a past president of the Buddhist Churches of America. He is presently a member of the Board of Trustees of the Graduate School, the Institute of Buddhist Studies in Berkeley, California. Rick practiced law for 41 years in Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C. He graduated from UCLA with a degree in history and from Loyola University Law School, where he received a teaching fellowship and taught law for several years. He has appeared before the U.S. Supreme Court. He worked as a civil rights lawyer, providing pro bono legal representation in the early 1980s. Rick interviewed and took depositions of scores of Japanese Americans who were unconstitutionally imprisoned during World War II. Rick lives in San Fernando Valley with his wife, Robin Steinhardt. Their cat, Shiva, and Sam, a neighborhood squirrel of some renown. As I said, Rick does way more than this. And those of you that know him, he really is a wonderful speaker and a wonderful person. So if please enjoy this offering that he's able to give to us today. Thank you very much, Mr. Rick Stambul, for joining us in this way, and thank you everyone for listening deeply to how he shares his life of Sanbutsuge. Thank you.
Please join me in Kansho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda. Good morning. I'm honored to have been invited by your resident minister, Reverend Kory Quon, to deliver a lay Dharma talk on the occasion of your Temple Sangha's Eitaikyo service. Reverend Kory and I have been friends for some years now. In fact, inscribed in the red Jodo Shinshu service book I carry with me is the date Reverend Quon gave me this book as a gift, November 10, 2017. Today, November 14, 2021, is also a special day, as it's Kory Sensei's birthday, and I wish him a happy birthday. Eitaikyo represents the perpetual commitment of Venice Honganji Buddhist Temple to chant for all its members who have passed. It honors each of them for the gifts they have given others during their lives, and in another sense, the gifts they continue to give us. Venice Buddhist Temple has been special to me for a long time. Starting in 1985, as a new member of the West Los Angeles Buddhist Temple, I danced at your Obon Odori with 8 close friends, all of us members of different BCA temples in Southern California, in a group known at the time as the Bullet Train. To the frustration of the Odori teachers, we danced twice as fast as everyone else, up the middle of the circle, leaping high into the air. I'm told by my Nisei friends this was unheard of at the time. We all wore yukatas and once even painted tattoos on our backs. We were irreverent, full of ourselves, not the least bit humble. And we danced for decades at Venice and at many different temples throughout the Southland. We were even encouraged by your resident minister at the time, Reverend Matsubayashi. He introduced me to the teapot he kept on the Yagara, filled with bourbon or scotch. I don't think I ever really knew which one it was. We ate chicken gizzards together in the back of your temple, behind the kitchen, washed down with glasses of beer. Reverend Matsubayashi was always kind and welcoming. Over the years, I also came to know some of your temple members as good Dharma friends. In the 1980s, a series of causes and conditions led me to the West Los Angeles Buddhist Temple. I was searching for something meaningful and liberating in my life. While I could appreciate fundamental Buddhist doctrines, I couldn't connect at all with the sermons I was hearing from Shin Buddhist ministers. Most often I would hear a sermon telling me I was accepted by the Buddha just as I was. There was nothing I had to do other than recite the name. The Pure Land was a place like heaven that my ancestors went when they died. I couldn't connect with any of this. Then, over a number of years, I heard BCA Bishop Marvin Harada talking about his Buddhist teachers and his path to Jodo Shinshu. He turned me on to his teacher, Reverend Guillaume Kabose, and his book, Everyday Suchness. Kabose Sensei talked about Shin Buddhism in a way I'd never heard before. He taught that Amida Buddha represents that which we should become. I came to see and connect with Amida as a symbol to be understood metaphorically. If Amida is a symbol for the truth of enlightenment, wisdom, and compassion, then isn't this what we should become? To me, that is Shinjin, when that heart and mind of the Buddha, wisdom and compassion, hits our heart and mind. This was a teaching with which I could really connect. Many years later, I read the writings of Reverend Kabose's teacher, Reverend Haya Akegarasu. Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto, president of the Institute of Buddhist Studies, made Jodo Shinshu come alive for me when he talked about authenticity and shame. I read everything I could find in English by his teacher, Reverend Dr. Takamaro Shigaraki. Reverend Shigaraki was a Buddhist priest and intellectual, universally recognized as one of the world's leading Shin Buddhist scholars. He said, and I quote, "The Pure Land is to be recognized as the ideal world which our human society can become. Many people grasp the Pure Land abstractly," he said, simply as a world that exists after death. However, that is not a correct understanding. Understood properly, the Pure Land is the ultimate and ideal realm which today's human society should constantly aim to become. I believe, Shigaraki continues, that we should strive as one to make the planet reflect, even just a little, the Pure Land of the Buddha. This teaching includes making our world the best it can be. These teachings, this way of looking at Shin Buddhism, blew my socks off. It is through my appreciation of these Buddhist teachers that I came to embrace Shin Buddhism as my path. So, how does all this inform us about Eitaikyo? Let me try to connect the dots. I've lived a long time. I have known many special and unique people, many of whom I met through the Buddhist Churches of America and the Hawaii Kyodan. When we lose a loved one or someone with whom we are deeply connected, it often brings grief, heartache, and other difficult feelings that cause us distress and suffering. I'd like to talk a bit about that grief. Maybe I can offer a different perspective, a new way of thinking about the meaning of Eitaikyo and such sadness that I learned from my Buddhist teachers. There's an old Chinese proverb I was introduced to by my friend Gordon Vermont, a past BCA president, which goes something like this: "You cannot stop the birds of sadness from flying over your head, but you can stop them from building nests in your hair." How can we stop the birds of sadness from building nests in our hair? Don't take the word hair too literally, as I've already begun losing my hair, so there's really no comfortable place for them to nest. But seriously, as with Gordon, the vivid imagery distinguishing birds flying overhead versus birds nesting in my hair impressed me. I see it today as a powerful image. The birds of grief, sadness, anxiety, stress, fear fly overhead throughout my life. Yet there is a way to live in this aviary of grief that eases the weight of everything that would otherwise fall more heavily on us. How do we keep the birds of sadness from nesting in our hair? I used to believe that simple choices we make can keep sadness and regret at bay. Just be tough, I thought. Man up, if you pardon the expression. Stop feeling grief. Just stop. I guess I imagined I was so powerful I could help a friend stop feeling depressed just by telling them to stop. I acted as if I could rid myself or my friends of grief by sheer willpower. Shin Buddhism taught me that feelings don't work that way. I learned about two of the most important concepts in Shin Buddhism: self-power, or jiriki, and power beyond the self, or tariki. Many of us are familiar with the term other power. Other power always sounded to me like a reference to God calling from above somewhere. So I prefer a term I learned from Dr. Nobuo Haneda of the Maida Center in Berkeley, California: power beyond the self. Self-power, jiriki, and power beyond the self, tariki. Power beyond the self, or tariki, refers to the Dharma, the truth of conditional arising, or the truth of impermanence. These are fancy words, yet their meaning is simple. The truth of conditional arising means that everything exists as a collection of causes and conditions. Nothing exists by itself. Dr. Haneda teaches there's nothing permanent or independent in me, no substantial self. Consequently, power beyond the self refers to the truth of conditional arising, and is a term that explains the true manner of how I exist. Okaga Samade. We exist by countless causes and conditions, by the thousands of things and people and events that join together to make up our daily lives. Then what is self-power? It means ignorance of the power beyond the self. Dr. Haneda writes that self-power means overestimating our own abilities. Tariki, or power beyond the self, can unlock the Buddha's truth and help us minimize the despair and grief of loss. So what is tariki, or power beyond the self? I'd like to share a story I learned from my most influential teacher, my grandfather. He taught me about tariki, power beyond the self, even though he never heard that term. Tariki is what we learn from our most special teachers. I entitle my story, My Grandfather's Wooden Swing. There's a story I once heard, and it starts like this. A rabbi asks his students, how can we know when night ends and day begins? How can we tell night from day? That's an intriguing question, and it has an even more intriguing answer. But first, let me tell you a little about the man who told me that story, my grandpa, Abraham Marcus. My grandfather was born in October 1885 in a tiny farming village in Romania. At that time, thousands of Jewish families were being murdered in pogroms because of their religion. So, at the age of 15, he left home and emigrated first to London and 4 years later to New York City. He was a carpenter and barrel maker, and later he became a farmer in upstate New York. When I was a very young boy living in the San Fernando Valley, I announced rather precociously to my parents that I was going to spend my summers with my grandpa on his 75-acre chicken farm in New York State's Catskill Mountains. My parents agreed, and off I went to the Catskills to spend summers with my grandpa. Grandpa had built a 3-story farmhouse back in 1910 when he first bought the farm. And I think it was before I was born, in the early 1940s, that he built a large wooden swing that 4 people could sit on, facing each other. A skilled carpenter, Grandpa made the swing out of white picket fence posts. He and I would sit there after dinner each evening, swinging back and forth, sometimes sitting in silence as Grandpa smoked his pipe. When there was too much silence for my young comfort, I'd say, "Grandpa," and he'd reply eventually, "What?" Waiting a moment or two, I'd say, "Oh, nothing." Later, I came to realize that was my way of telling Grandpa I loved him. Chicken farming was hard work, and Grandpa never made much money at it. So he built 7 bungalows on our farm, about 150 yards south of the main house. The bungalows my grandfather built with his own hands were tiny 2-bedroom affairs with a small master bedroom and 1 tiny room for the kids. There was also a small kitchen, not large enough for 2 people to stand in at the same time. Just outside the kitchen, there was a small porch, just large enough for a water heater and some electrical wiring. Families from New York City would rent 1 or more bungalows during the summer months. Most often, the mothers would come up with their children during the week, and their husbands would join them on the weekends. There was a sense of community among the families who stayed in our bungalows. This was remarkable when you think about it, since the families who stayed in our bungalows were either religious Jews or Irish American Catholics. This sense of community was shared by our family, my grandpa, my grandmother Dora, and myself. I remember that sometimes on warm summer nights, the families would gather together around the swing Grandpa had built, and they'd sit around and tell stories. I was about 12 at that time, and we'd join the guests. These stories often had a moral, something to ignite discussion by everyone, by the mothers, the children, the entire group. On one of those August evenings, still warm from the heat of the day, we gathered for a story, this time for my grandpa. I filled his pipe with the required 3 layers of tobacco, Prince Albert, I think it was, leaving the very top layer a bit looser than the rest. Using 1 hand, he struck a kitchen match on his thumbnail and lit his pipe, spreading a wonderful odor around all those seated. And he told the following story. A rabbi tells his students, "Listen, class, there's night and there's day, right? Night and day. But how can we know when night ends and day begins? How can we tell night from day?" So the students think about it and think about it. And finally, one of the students raises a hand and the rabbi calls him. And the student says, "Is it when you can see 2 animals in the distance and you can tell which is a dog and which is a sheep?" The rabbi says, "Good. But that's not the answer I was looking for. Any other ideas?" So a second student raises his hand and says, "Is it when you can see 2 trees in the distance and you realize one is an olive tree and the other a grapevine?" "Good answer," says the rabbi, "but sorry, that's not right either." So the students are all stumped and they plead with the rabbi, "Please tell us the answer. How can you tell the difference between night and day?" "I'll tell you," says the rabbi. "I'll tell you. Night becomes day when you can look into the face of any human being, and there is enough light to recognize him as your brother. Until then, it is night, and darkness is still with us." I was very young, but I've never forgotten that story. My grandpa explained this was a story with many lessons. It was about looking at all human beings, men, women, children, anyone, as though they were family. If you think of the stranger as family, then you don't think of that individual as a threat. Rather, they are valuable members of the human family, of our family. It doesn't matter if they're different from us. Maybe they came from a different background, with ancestors from different places, perhaps with different complexions or skin colors. We're all one family. I never found anything my grandfather taught me to be wrong or worthless. His stories and lessons have always given me strength when I felt doubt or fear. Men like my grandpa cannot die. He's still with me long after his death, more than 45 years ago. The great Shin Buddhist scholar, Reverend Hyobyaku-mon, taught that the power which may come from such stories is called tariki. Reverend Hyobyaku-mon, in his commentary on the Sanbutsuge, teaches us what tariki is really all about. He says, quote, "Many people mistakenly think that tariki means having an attitude like a beggar and getting something, like a beggar who stands in front of a church or temple and begs, 'Could I have some spare change?' So many people think that tariki means pray to the Buddha to save you." Reverend Hyobyaku continues, "But that is not real tariki. Real tariki is to touch the light of a teacher, to be illuminated by that teacher, and to have the same wish, the same resolve of the teacher rise up in you. This is the only way," he says, "tariki is related and transmitted." How do we stop the birds of sadness from nesting in our hair? I've learned that self-power, my own efforts, won't stop grief and despair. Once in a while, we hear a teacher, a Buddhist minister, a friend, whose message touches us, who gives us a new way of looking at the world around us, and sometimes even a new way to look at ourselves. Most all of us could recall at least one teacher in our lives. Maybe a Shin Buddhist minister, maybe a teacher back in grammar school, high school, or college, who stands out from all the other teachers we ever encountered. I'm referring to those teachers who enabled us to see our world in a different way than we had ever seen it before. This is tariki, or power beyond the self. I continue to search for those teachers who have the power to allow me to see the world and myself in a new, positive, and optimistic way. I hope you join me in that search. Maybe that teacher can help us keep the birds of sadness from nesting in our hair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for your enlightening message. Next, we will sing the Gatha Ondokusan, which is on page 58 of the service book.
benevolence of Amida's great compassion that we must strive to return it, even to the breaking of our body. Such is the benevolence of the masters and true teachers that we must strive to repay. We must endeavor to repay it, even to our bones becoming dust. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
We will now have words of appreciation by our temple president, Jerry Iseda.
Good morning, everybody. I love technology, so I forgot my glasses, but I can make this larger so I can read it. So, anyway, on behalf of the temple, I want to thank you all virtually and those who came in person today to join us as we remember so many of our former members, friends, and loved ones who have passed away. It's nice to see people back in the Hondo again, and hope to see more and more of you come as the weeks pass and as things go on. So either way, by Zoom or in person, we're happy to have you. So thank you very much. Special thank you to Rick Stambul for being our guest speaker today. We understand Rick was a little under the weather, so we hope him a speedy recovery as well. And thank you to our chairperson, Barbara Fuji, and our organist, Julia Ueda, both for doing the job for the service, but also reading the names of the almost 300 members in our Eitaikyo book. That's a lot to do. So we'll feed them some tea with honey after so they can get their voice back. Thank you to our AD crew. So Kerry Tokirio, Tami Nakagiri, and Ron G. And for running the video so that you all may see it at home as well. And you may have noticed some extra flowers up on the Onaiji today, so a special thank you to Kenzo Yonemitsu for the special bouquets today. Today is also, if you are one of our, how shall I say this, more experienced recipients, today is Senior Dharma Delivery Day. So our young volunteers are on their way to your house to deliver goodies for today. So thank you again to our coordinator, Elena Minamoto, her husband Gino, and her father Ed, who had come down from the Bay Area today to help us pack the bags, and to Michelle Warren as well for helping with the bag assembly. So we hope you enjoy again this month's goodies as well. And of course, thank you to Reverend Kory, as always, for having service for us. So much appreciation. And finally, we're getting close. This is the middle of November already. So just a big thank you to everybody. You'll hear me say this a lot. But thank you very much for all your support, participation during the year. We had another very productive and very successful year. And thanks to everyone for participating and for your support. So we'll ask for more again in 22 as we are starting the process to look forward. So look forward to more announcements about our Shinenkai in 2022, as well as what we hope will be our return to an Obon festival as well. So we'll have many activities and things for you to look forward to as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Are there any announcements? Please unmute yourself.
I'm not hearing anybody, so I'm going to jump in. So before we start announcements, it's Project Ondokusan time for November. So this is our monthly selection for the people who participated in 2021's Project Ondokusan. Quick commercial for 2022, we are now accepting donations for that. Remember, this is the monthly draw we have where we select one person who will receive $500. And very exciting, next month we will select 2 people who will each get $1,000, just in time for year end. So I'm gonna go get the little drum and we have someone new.
Oh, thank you.
Let's-
That would be boring.
Okay. Select one. Okay, thank you. Done? Kory. I have not looked. Okay.
Oh. This month's selectee is Garrett Sogave.
Okay.
Thank you. We have to put it back in.
Congratulations, Derek. We have one more announcement. So we do know today is Reverend Kory's birthday. It's actually his birthday. So we would like to say happy birthday to him. His own candle.
I brought my own cake. What are you talking about?
We don't have to buy a cake. We bought his own cake, so we'll share that celebration. You have the lighter?
Oh, you were serious about lighting candles. Oh.
Janice brought a cake also.
Oh.
So we have 2 cakes. This one's from Dharma School.
Should put it on there. Oh, there really is a candle. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dharma School. Actually, Elena brought me a bunch of goodies yesterday too.
Oh, it's a cake.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending this morning's service. You can now unmute yourself and continue visiting with all of your friends. Thank you.
Is that benediction?